What's up, guys? UFC 303 just wrapped up, and that card was something. The knockouts that happened were crazy. Like, flatline, no controversy, terrifying knockouts. Alex Pereira hitting Jiri with a shaman kick, KOing him, and Herb Dean just allowed Pereira to put him on death's door. With his shaman magic, he summoned Maru Yamasaki's spirit into Herb Dean that night. Joe Pyfer proved he is the second or third most powerful puncher in the world. Well, yeah, second most powerful. He hits harder than Ngannou, and I'm starting to believe it with that knockout. He put Barriault to sleep, glancing hooks on him, and then finished him off, I think, with an uppercut, putting him out cold, kind of Johnny Walker style. John Silva hitting Charles Jourdain with a Shoryuken, uppercut from the clinch, knocks out Charles Jourdain, the first fighter to ever knock Jourdain out. Silva did miss weight though. I don't know if missing weight by 2 pounds is going to give him that much more power and an advantage to knock Jourdain out. Payton Talbott getting a 19-second knockout on Yanis Ghemmouri. That kid is for real. Bro tapped into some like Espada powers. And the entire early prelims went to a decision, every single fight there, even though I thought Vinicius Oliveira performed very well. Tsuruya had some very interesting techniques out there as well. He took the fight up on short notice. Most of the main card went to a decision except Macy, Chiasson, and Alex Pereira's fights. The prelims though were bangers. Like, there were some really good fights in there. The only one that kind of ruined it on the prelims was Andrei Fili, with clinching up, hugging Cub Swanson as much as he did, which I did not expect him to fight that way. In fact, there were a couple fights like that. Even Andrei Arlovski versus Martin Buday was a hug fest. And so was Machado Garry hugging Michael Page the entire fight. Nobody expected him to fight like that. He's normally a striker with actual good technique, but it looked like he didn't have as much confidence to beat Michael Page in the stand-up that he wanted to just hug him out and try to win like that. Every other fight where the guys actually wanted to compete and throw down with each other, those were all the good fights. The co-main event was excellent. The main event was excellent. Silva versus Chiasson was good. Pyfer versus Barriault. Jourdain versus Silva. Talbott versus Ghemmouri. Vinicius Oliveira and Ricky Simone's fight was kind of interesting. Robertson had a one-sided performance against Michelle Waterson Gomes. That was a complete domination. And we're going to start with that main event. Alex Pereira knocks out Jiri Prochazka at the beginning of the second round. Head kick knockout. He switched it up. Instead of knocking him out with the left hook, he knocked him out with the left kick. Left hook cemetery, left kick cemetery in Powhatan fashion. I mean, he made that fight look so simple, and I have to shout out my pre-fight breakdown. In fact, most of my pre-fight breakdowns are really on point. I'm just observing, you know. I analyze the fights before, I look at the strengths and weaknesses of the fighters, and most of my pre-fight breakdowns, especially in the past like 2 years, have been really on point. Down to the techniques, down to how they're going to win. Just like in this one, Jiri Prochazka, his unpredictable style is going to be effective the first time they fight. But in a rematch, especially after Pereira knocked him out in the first fight, or TKO'd him, it's going to become a lot easier for Pereira to get the timing down and know exactly what Prochazka is going to do. In fact, he was slipping the punches where in the first fight he wasn't. He was countering the takedown opportunities from Prochazka with a body jab. And instead of walking in straight lines back to the fence and getting barraged on by the blitzing combinations from Prochazka, this time he just countered with the left hook because he knows that Jiri drops his right hand every time he throws punches, and that's why the left hook caught him twice. The head kick was just there, right? He didn't even need to throw a head kick. He could have just lunged in with a left hook, and I think he would have knocked him out, but he threw something a little bit more safe from range to land on Prochazka. Jiri lacking the basics caused him to get caught by some of those big punches and kicks from Pereira, and it just goes to show you, man, Pereira's different. He's the main character. He's actually the main character of MMA, and for his next fight, he's got to fight Magomed Ankalaev. I know there's a lot of talk about him going up to heavyweight, and I would love to see it, 100%. Him versus Tom Aspinall, him versus John Jones. These are magnificent fights to put on, but I just don't know if he's ready for the wrestling. I would love to see him fight Magomed Ankalaev to test that wrestling against someone who actually is good in that area, like really good there. And if he can beat Magomed Ankalaev, he is ready for Aspinall and Jones. Because when it comes to the stand-up, neither of them are beating him. From middleweight and up, there's not a single fighter that can beat Pereira in the stand-up more times out of 10 that he would beat them, right? I think the only other guy that could is Adesanya. But Pereira beats Adesanya more often than Adesanya beats him, which is pretty evident. I think John Jones is a harder matchup and a more legendary fight for him. Tom Aspinall, I think, would stand up with him for a bit, but the way that guy holds his chin up in the air, man, he's asking to get knocked out. He's also very basic with his boxing compared to what Pereira can do. For heavyweight, though, Tom Aspinall's a top-tier boxer, but for Pereira, it's nothing he hasn't seen before. Tom's a big guy, he's fast for that weight class, he hits hard, but technically speaking, it's nothing Pereira cannot handle. So I think he should fight Ankalaev next, but if he goes up to heavyweight, that would be excellent too. As for Jiri Prochazka, he needs to take some time off. These guys jumped up on short notice to fight each other saving the main event. I think on his return, he could fight like Jan Blachowicz or maybe even Jamal Hill whenever Hill returns. Those would be pretty good fights. And then for the co-main event, you know, speaking of fighters that saved a fight on the card, Diego Lopes defeated Dan Ige by a decision. A pretty close fight, competitive, and it's crazy how many times the co-main event changed. It was originally Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree Jr. Then it was Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg. Then it was Anthony Smith versus Carlos Ulberg. Then it was Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. And now it was Dan Ige versus Diego Lopes. And shout out to both guys. I don't think either of them lose anything in that fight. Dan Ige officially lost the fight on his record, but I don't think it should go against him at all. The guy took it up on like a few hours notice. The fastest short notice turnaround in UFC history. This guy literally just jumped in there on the same day. They fought at a catch weight of 165 pounds. Diego Lopes had to cut weight to 145, right? I think he made like 146, John Anik was saying. Then the fight was at 155 with Ortega because Ortega couldn't cut all that weight. Ortega pulled out because of a fever, and then the fight got raised all the way to 165. 20 pounds of a jump for Diego Lopes. So I don't think we saw the best version of either fighter in there, because there is a lot of talk about Diego Lopes getting exposed by Dan Ige. Stylistically, Ige is a very tough fight for Diego Lopes because the guy has solid boxing, offensively and defensively. He hits very hard. One of the few guys that can match the power of Diego Lopes. He's got decent wrestling, trained with guys like Khabib over there and all that. He learned a lot from those wrestlers. And because he cut that weight and then fought a guy who weighed much heavier than him, right? Ige walked into the catchweight fight at 165 pounds, but he probably weighed a little bit more. Whereas Diego Lopes was 161 pounds. He's gonna gas out a bit trying to wrestle and get aggressive against a guy who was heavier than he was. Because naturally, Diego Lopes is a bigger guy than Dan Ige, but because he cut down to 146 pounds and Dan Ige cut almost no weight, very little weight, if anything, he was for the first time smaller than his opponent, which he wouldn't normally be. So that is going to play physically like a toll on Diego Lopes, trying to wrestle with him, take him to the ground, which he tried, barrage him with combinations, and get really funky with all the punches that he was throwing. He has a very awkward style on the feet. He was starting a lot of his combinations off of his knees, right? He'll throw up a knee at the shorter opponent, then try to land hooks around the guard. And even for a guy as tall as he is, he dips really low for some of those. It's extremely strange to fight against. And Dan Ige hit him with some big shots, man. The kind of punches that he's knocked other opponents out with. And Lopes just took him, even though he cut weight. Diego Lopes has a chin on him, where a lot of other Brazilian fighters are known to not have the greatest chins, especially current Brazilian fighters. Diego Lopes training with those Mexicans absorbed some of that durability or something, because he should not have taken those punches the way he did. I mean, he even took a head kick. He took a full-on head kick, grabbed it after, dragged the fight to the ground. The guy's chin is unreal, and his grappling was amazing, man. How fast he grabbed onto that Darce choke. That choke was tight, but amazing fight for two guys that step up at short notice like that. And you got to talk about the Hawaiians, man. These guys are always down to scrap. From the legends of BJ Penn and Max Holloway to Dan Ige. If you ever need someone to show up and fight, call up these Hawaiian fighters, man. Even the civilians over there know how to fight. It's crazy. If you ever seen some of those videos, these guys are throwing like calf kicks and spinning back kicks to the body and check left hooks, jabs, hands up and stuff. Amazing, man. I would love to see the rematch at 145 pounds. Training camp from both guys, because I think it would be a really good fight. Stylistically, with a good game plan from both fighters, that could be a fight of the night anywhere else. Then we go to Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze, where Dolidze won by a decision. It was a weird fight. There was that one moment where Dolidze hit him. I think Anthony Smith kind of stumbled to the ground. Dolidze was wailing on top of him. Smith just didn't do much in the fight. And I think he was asking after that he wants a training camp now. You know, he doesn't want to keep stepping up at short notice like that. He looked like kind of lethargic out there, very slow, labored shots, and just like not calculating exactly what he's throwing. There were times where Roman Dolidze was throwing punches and like dropping his hands or almost turning his entire back to Smith, and Smith just kind of let him go. They both landed some really good leg kicks on each other. Roman Dolidze looked like he should have. You know, a guy who stepped up on very short notice. I feels like I'm saying that a lot because the last 3 fights were all short notice fights. Man, this card was so strange with all the pullouts, man. Looking at the official lineup and then looking at it now, it's crazy how different it is. And it's crazy to think we could have saw Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. Maybe they would have added Smith and Dolidze later. Who knows? But now that Dolidze, as he said many times, he's a top 10 fighter in 2 divisions. He's willing to fight in both weight classes. He's number 10 at middleweight. He's probably going to be number 10 or 11 or something at light heavyweight. Give him Johnny Walker. I'm trying to see something. Is there me, or is it like recommending anyone to fight Johnny Walker just feels wrong? Like, bro, if he cannot beat Roman Dolidze, who's a natural middleweight, then like, come on, you know, like he should be beating guys like that. He should be beating guys who are much smaller than him, coming up from a different weight class, aren't the best strikers, not the most powerful guys, you know? So like, Roman hits hard, of course, but it's not something Johnny Walker hasn't fought before. But then when he does fight power punchers, he gets Looney Tunes KO'd out cold. Let's do Roman Dolidze versus Johnny Walker. Then we go to Mayra Bueno Silva, losing to Macy Chiasson by a doctor stoppage in the second round, even though she won the first round. She looked like the better fighter overall. And it's crazy how a fighter won the previous round. They're lose in the second round, but you know, they only fought for about half the round. And one elbow causes a cut and Macy Chiasson wins by a TKO. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine in the Michelle Waterson and Gillian Robertson fight that in the third round, Waterson lands one elbow, cuts up Robertson, and then Waterson wins by a TKO. But in that fight, Silva was giving it to her in the first round with the knees, the uppercuts in the clinch, some of the high kicks. Even in the second round, she went in for that armbar. But Chiasson did have that good trip that got Silva on the ground in the first place. Then who should they fight next? I'm not gonna lie to you guys, man. I don't care about this weight class. Give Chiasson Raquel Pennington next. Why not? Well, no, Kayla Harrison should fight Raquel Pennington. Give her Juliana Pena if she's not fighting Pennington. Honestly, they're all gonna lose to Kayla Harrison. It doesn't even matter. Then we got Ian Machado Garry defeating Michael Venom Page by a decision. Bro talked all that trash about Michael Venom Page's stand-up and said that he would embarrass him, and he came in with a game plan. He tried to trick Michael Page into thinking that he would stand up with him, and even though he won, bro's stock plummeted because at the very least, where everybody does not like his personality, at the very least, he had an interesting, fun fighting style. And with him trying to hug Michael Page the entire fight, did not try to fight him on the feet whatsoever, right? Threw like one high kick, a couple punches, and that's it. Bro tried to make that fight as boring as possible. Now, it's a strategy, it's a game plan. Michael Page's grappling has never been that good, but it's showing that Michael Page's stand-up is something that the welterweights don't really want to fight against. And even though he got Michael Page down in the first round and got his back, went in for the choke, in the third round, he got him on the ground and could not submit the guy. At least when Shavkat fought Wonderboy, he was able to submit him. But when Ian Garry takes down Michael Page, he cannot submit him. There's a clear difference in skill between Ian Garry and Shavkat Rakhmonov, and that's potentially one of the opponents he can go up against next. In fact, it's a guy that he called out. He said he would fight Shavkat, he would fight Usman, he'd fight Leon. Ian Garry would lose to all three of those fighters. I think Shavkat finishes him. I think Usman could knock him out. Leon probably beats him by a decision. The performance wasn't necessarily impressive. It was enough for him to get a victory against a specialist, but when he goes up against guys like Shavkat Rakhmonov or Leon Edwards, these guys are well-rounded, and it seems like he doesn't have the confidence in his own stand-up to fight guys as good as they are, right? Because Michael Page versus like Shavkat on the feet only is quite competitive. Leon versus Michael Page on the feet only is competitive. If not, Leon might beat him there. The fact that Ian Garry did not trust his skills in the stand-up to fight with Michael Page is very alarming when he goes up against those other guys. So who should Ian Garry fight next? The reason why people give a lot of props to Michael Page is because even in the third round, he had top position on Ian Garry, and he could have probably held that position to win the third round, ultimately win the decision. But he didn't want people to think that he was boring. He stood up, thought that Ian Garry would fight him on the feet again, right? Third round of the fight, we're 1-1. Let's give the fans a show. And Ian Garry did not want to do that. Where Michael Page could have easily sat on top of him, get backlash from the fans, and win the fight. And Ian Machado Garry had the gall to shout out Charles Oliveira after that performance. Bro, Oliveira put his hat on, his sunglasses, and faded into the woods, right? Disappeared into the shadows. He didn't want to be seen after that shout out. He's like, I don't know that guy. How dare you shout out Charlie Olives after fighting like that? Oliveira would never. That's Shuto Box, man. No Shuto Box fighter fights like that. And Ian Garry was talking about next level striker, new generation, all this stuff. Come on, man. He won the fight, but it was a huge disappointment. It's really going to depend if they are doing Usman versus Shavkat next, because that was a fight that I think Khabib wanted to do, right? Khabib was saying that Usman and Shavkat should fight each other. Ali Abdelaziz was saying that Usman should fight Wonderboy, which is a interesting matchup. If Shavkat's not fighting Usman, they can do Ian Garry versus Shavkat. That would be pretty cool. If they are doing Shavkat versus Usman, then they could do Colby versus Ian Garry. But it seems like Colby's not interested in fighting Ian at all. So I really don't know what to do with Colby Covington specifically. It's gonna just come down to who he wants to fight that isn't a champion. Jack Della Maddalena is still injured. He's still out of commission, so I don't know when he's gonna come back. So either Ian Garry versus Colby or Ian Garry versus Shavkat. And as for Michael Venom Page, do Michael Page and Jeff Neal. That'd be a pretty cool fight. Then we go to Joe Pyfer knocking out Marc-Andre Barriault in the very first round. This guy wasted no time. I mean, he was talking a lot about, composing himself and not just looking for power punches, which he was actually doing pretty well. He was measuring his shots. He wasn't going crazy with the hooks initially, and then he landed one of them. And Barriault was on wobbly legs, man. Another one glanced above the ear, it seems, or behind the ear. Then he got KO'd unconscious. That was a very one-sided short fight for Joe Pyfer. This guy really does hit very hard, and he called out Paul Craig. Rankings wise, it makes sense. Stylistically, they would need a stretcher on the side for Paul Craig, unless he catches him in a triangle choke. That's happened before. I mean, this is the same guy who submitted Ankalaev and Jamal Hill, or TKO Jamal Hill, I guess. When people count out Paul Craig, he always pulls it off, man. Well, he used to always pull it off. I think Joe Pyfer's wrestling game would completely nullify the entire Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game of Paul Craig. And we know Paul Craig doesn't want anything to do with the stand-up. That guy would probably be pulling guard the entire fight. Andrei Fili defeated Cub Swanson by a decision. Another competitive fight. I just did not expect Andrei Fili to clinch as much as he did, right? Cub Swanson has a wild style. I mean, this guy's throwing haymakers, fights like a Tasmanian devil, spinning around, throwing his hands and feet everywhere. And he cracked Andrei Fili with some really big shots. But Andrei also caught him with some good check hooks. His back was on the fence for a lot of that fight. Cub Swanson's putting the pressure on him, especially in that third round. Fili had some good kicks early on in that fight. It was a really good one without all the clinching and holding Cub Swanson up against the fence, which I get it, you got to get a win and stuff, but it's not what the fans really want to see. And maybe Andrei Fili fought that way because he was coming off a knockout loss against Dan Ige, and he was trying to avoid getting slumped again by Cub Swanson, who hits very hard, or at least throws his hands like he's trying to take your head off, So I think that's why he went to this whole clinching game, and knowing that Cub Swanson overextends whenever he's throwing punches like that. John Silva came in a couple pounds overweight and knocked out Charles Jourdain in the second round, the first fighter to ever do it. This guy hit so hard, man. That one check left hook in the first round, man, dropped Charles Jourdain. I think the second fighter to ever do it in the UFC. And then off of the clinch, he hit him with a tight uppercut at a very weird angle, the way he was holding him. Beautiful shot, flooring Jourdain like that, man. They were high-fiving each other a lot in that fight, though, especially early on. I get it when fighters do it like one time, maybe twice, like before the fight, then at the beginning of the fight. I understand that. But over and over again, every time they throw a punch at each other, high five, man. They shoot a double leg, high five. Slip a jab, high five. Like, it breaks the whole rhythm and flow of the fight for the fans. I don't know if it's a strategy from John Silva to make it feel like a sparring session for Charles Jourdain and then explode on him with some big shot. But man, this guy hits hard regardless. Payton Talbott knocking out Yanis Ghemmouri in 19 seconds. This kid is for real, man. He is probably the best prospect in the sport. I know a lot of people talk about Bo Nickel, but Talbott is the entire package. This guy has it all. He's got an interesting personality. He's got an interesting look. He's a knockout artist. Very technical too. Strong, powerful, fast, athletic, everything. The only thing is his movement is kind of on the slower side. His punches are quick. He has a good eye for fighting. And I don't want to get into too much about this fight because I do have a breakdown coming up on it. Crazy though, he was a minus 1600 favorite and even exceeded those expectations. Nobody thought he would knock the guy out that quickly. Gillian Robertson defeating Michelle Waterson Gomes by a decision. Dominant win. I was surprised there was no 30-25s even. I thought that fight could have been a 10-8 across the board every single round for Gillian Robertson. She completely dominated the fight. Kept going for arm bars, landing big ground and pound shots, controlled almost the entire fight on the ground. And then the strangest advice from Mike Winkeljohn telling Michelle Waterson, hey, shoot a takedown. Michelle Waterson listened to her coach and she got reversed very quickly, back on the ground again, getting elbowed in the face, more armbar attempts. I don't understand why he told her to shoot a takedown. She should be avoiding the ground with Gillian Robertson with all she could. Punching and moving, kicking and moving. Keep the fight in the stand-up. Don't back up into the fence. These are the kind of advice that you would want to give Michelle Waterson, but stylistically, especially at her age, it was a tough fight for her to win, man. Gillian Robertson is really good on the ground. She's bigger than Michelle as well. She's physically stronger. It's a tough fight for Waterson. And she retired after, she was a true pioneer pioneer for the smaller weight classes of women's MMA. When we look at atomweight and strawweight, she was one of the first to do it. So that's why people call her a pioneer, if anybody was confused. Not necessarily because she had the biggest wins and she beat the best fighters, but I think her best win was either Angela Hill, Carolina, or maybe Paige Van Zandt. But she's been fighting for a very long time in those smaller weight classes. Martin Buday hugged Andrei Arlovski for 15 minutes, and Andrei Arlovski hugged him back for 15 minutes. Then what about Tsuruya? Looking really good on short notice. Well, he's only 22 years old, defeating Carlos Hernandez. This kid's grappling looks really slick, man. You see the way in the first round how he was attacking the legs and then got the back? Second round had that fireman's carry. Crazy scrambles on the ground, man. Crucifix position from the back. Tried to get a twister at one point. Almost went for inverted triangle at one point. Belly to belly suplex, which I think was off a fake glove touch. Bro came out there with every trick in the book. And he even had that one pro wrestler in his corner. Good win for Ray. And then Vinicius Oliveira defeating Ricky Simon by a decision. This man is like the bantamweight version of Jiri Prochazka. Bro had his hands down the entire fight, throwing out the weirdest, wildest techniques. Full power punches and kicks out of nowhere at every angle. Bro's style is literally just scrap. Just throw hands. That's his style. There's nothing to it. I see your head and I try to touch it with my hands and feet. And at a certain point, it looked like Ricky Simon did not know how to deal with Vinicius Oliveira's style. He kind of looked frozen at certain points, getting caught by shots that he normally doesn't get caught by. But sometimes when you have that weird, unpredictable style, the first time you fight that, man, it's just overwhelming and it doesn't compute with the data you already have from all the training and drilling and experience and fighting other opponents. So pretty good card, guys, overall. And I hope you guys enjoy the card as well. I hope you guys enjoy the fights. Leave in the comments below what was your favorite moment of the card, favorite fight, favorite finish, and what do you guys see next for all these fighters. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.